Hello and welcome to the Freakish Lemon video podcast. I am your host, the Freakish Lemon. I go by Adrian and I use masculine pronouns. Welcome any new viewers. Thank you so much for clicking on whatever you clicked on to get here. I will explain in a moment. Welcome back any returning viewers. Thank you so much for checking out. You're a returning viewer. You already check out this podcast. Thank you so much for returning, and please excuse the sounds of construction / handiwork and now an ice cream truck. I'm not doing too good here. Let's wait for the evil ice cream truck to go by. I think it's gone. Okay. We're doing well. We're doing well this episode. So, yes. Before I get into the normal particulars of the podcast stuff that I usually do during my intro, this is not a regular episode of this podcast. This is a Crafty Type Things podcast coming to you from the Northwest Hills of Connecticut, but this is a special I-91 shop hop recap episode that I'm doing for you to talk about the I-91 shop hop that I just went on with my mom this past weekend. Yes. And the reason I'm doing that is, normally I will be filming next weekend. I don't know if that's going to happen, since that is the weekend that we will be moving Gabby from Once Upon a Corgi, who is my sister, into the new apartment. So I have no idea what that weekend's actually going to look like in terms of time to do things other than moving her into her new place. So, figured, instead of taking up half of a regular episode with talk about this shop hop, I'll do a special episode. And before I get into it, reminder that show notes to this episode and all episodes will be at my website at freakishlemon.com or freakishlemonpodcast.com. We have a Ravelry group over on Ravelry. Obviously, that's where you have a Ravelry group. It's on Rav. Just search Freakish Lemon in the groups tab and you will find us. You can follow me at all the fun places like Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Ravelry for stuff other than this. Although, if you do follow me in those places, you know, I'm not terribly great about keeping up with actual social media, except for Tumblr because it's all Star Wars and fanfiction, and you're welcome to join me there for that. But if you follow my Instagram, you'll have noticed that there were no photos of this entire yarn crawl that I went on. Because that's just not how my brain works. So, yes. The I-91 shop hop. This is a yarn crawl that takes place in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont along I-91. I'm hoping at some point I will show a picture of where I-91 is, so that you can get an idea of this type of thing. This year it was an 11-store shop hop, ranging from New Haven, Connecticut to Putney, Vermont. And this is the first time that me and my mom have ever done this shop. I think she first heard of it last year, and then she told me about it, and we decided that would be fun to do. We've only ever done the one yarn crawl in September, the Western Connecticut Yarn Council yarn crawl, which is a fantastic yarn crawl. But we figured it would be cool to do another one. Motorcycle? Okay. There's gonna be a lot of background noise today. It's hot, the windows are open, things are happening because it's a weekend. Oh boy. Anyway, we figured it would be fun to do a different yarn crawl because it's going to be all new shops to us, except for Knit New Haven, which I've been to before. And that's a cool way to get to know some local-ish shops in the area. This shop hop went from June 22nd to June 25th. I'm actually filming this on the 25th, so it's still going on as of filming right now, but by the time you're watching it, it will have been too late. But if this sounds interesting to you and you're in the area, plan for it next year. Just a brief overview of how this shop hop works. At one of the stores you buy... Is that a bird or my dog? I'm gonna say it was a bird. At one of these shops, either before or at the start of your crawl, you buy a passport, which is a document that looks kind of like this. There was another third. And limited time, depending on, you know, how many they had. You also got this I-91 shop hop bag, which we learned at the second to last store. Nobody else had this demonstrated. That this little thing down here, sorry for the noise, but you can shove this entire bag into this corner. To make it a little thingy that you can keep in your car or your purse or your backpack in case of a yarn emergency. That's what we were explicitly told. In case of a yarn emergency, you have a shopping bag. So that's pretty cool. But mainly, the $5 gets you an entry into the yarn crawl. So you get this, which has the location, address information of all the stores, the what the grand prizes will be, when it is, and then the third that's not here is where you get stamped for visiting participating locations. I think my dog might be mad that the door is closed. Hang on. Well, she was mad about the door being closed, but she didn't want to come in, so she has to figure out what she wants to do. As I was saying, passport with a bit where as you go to each store you get stamped and has you put your name and your address and your contact information in case you win a prize, because if you go to all of the yarn stores and they all get stamped, you can submit it for the grand prize drawings, which is super fun. Also, it's really fun to just go to all these stores, but random drawings for prizes are always a good time. This also makes you eligible for daily prize drawings at each of the locations that you go to. You get a free pattern, and you get a 15% off coupon at each of the stores that you visit for until the end of October, I believe, is the deadline for all those things. So, at each store you visit, you get a free pattern, you get a 15% off coupon for that store, and you get entered into that store's daily prize drawing. So, very fun stuff. I do have my stack of patterns here. Yes, that's a little bit different from the Western Connecticut yarn crawl. When you pay your $5 for your passport and or your bag, sometimes they have bags, sometimes they don't. It depends on what's happening with the stores, I think. But at the Western Connecticut yarn crawl, you pay your $5 for your passport. You get the, booklet with all the information, where it is, when it is, what the grand prizes are, and your stamps, the page where you stamp each store you go to, or the store stamps it when you get to the store. But the Western Connecticut Yarn Council also does free patterns. They do free patterns and free recipes, and they print it in a booklet, and just the last page is your passport page, which you can either chop it off or they'll take a photo of it to submit it for the grand prize drawing. And I have to say, I do like the booklet a lot more. For one thing, you're less likely to lose all your patterns, but also it ensures that they're all uniform. They all have to fit a certain space. You can see, I don't want to give away the patterns here, but you can see these are all different papers, slightly different sizes. Some of them are front and back, some of them are just the front. yeah, I mean, it's really cool that we're getting all these free patterns. It would just be a smidge more convenient if they were done in a booklet the way the Western Connecticut Yarn Council does their yarn crawl. Yep, and then you plan out your trip and you go visit all of the yarn stores. Word of advice, I was going to include this when talking about each of the stores, but by the third day we just kind of stopped asking the stores. There's no guarantee that these stores are going to let you use their bathroom. That's something that folks tend not to think about on trips like this, but most of the stores, when asked, directed us to another place in town. So it just became a habit to just start looking up where McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts were to go pop in and use their bathrooms when we needed to. Especially Putney, Vermont. There's nothing in Putney, Vermont. You have the nearest Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's is 5 miles away in Brattleboro. So that is something to keep in mind when you're doing these yarn crawls if you're in unfamiliar areas. That was never a problem with our Western Connecticut yarn crawl because we're familiar with most of the areas, especially the northernmost 4 stores. The furthest one is a whole half hour away from our house, but we know where the Walmarts and the grocery stores and the McDonald's and the Dunkin' Donuts are to use their bathrooms. Also, the Western Connecticut yarn crawl, most of the stores will offer their bathrooms to you. The only ones that had a restroom for patrons of the shop that was readily marked and easily available, that we definitely knew that we could use was Webb's, because just in their like back room section they have the bathrooms available. There were a couple of stores that there was one store when we asked, they absolutely let us use the bathroom because we had driven from Vermont to Granby, Connecticut with no stops in between. And there was a store, I believe it was the Wallingford store, looked like they had a restroom that if you're a patron of the shop you could use. It wasn't hidden away, the door was right there in the shop, so we didn't ask at that point, but that looked like it was readily available. But that is something that tends to get overlooked in your planning for trips like this, is where bathrooms are. And in a 3-state yarn crawl, it is important. So I'm going to talk about each of the shops that we went to, because 10 out of the 11 of them were new to me. And for each of these shops, I'm going to talk about how easy they were to get to, because going to a new shop, that's important to know. The size of the shop, and the selection of the yarns. None of the shops, except for Webb's, because Webb's had a lot of spinning items for purchase. Most of them were dedicated yarn, knitting, crocheting, that kind of thing. Webb's, of course, will be the exception to all of the rules because it is so much bigger than all of the other stores. But Webb's is also basically the Costco of yarn stores. So that's to be expected. But most of the other stores did not have much by way of spinning. Some stores had a few braids of fiber up for sale, but that was really it. So when I talk about each of the stores and I talk about the selection, I will only be talking about the yarn selection. I will also not be talking about the needle selection, since I did not really look at what the stores had for needles. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say there. So yeah, how easy they were to get to, the size of the store, and the selection of the yarns. And then if I bought anything, what I bought. So we did this yarn crawl over 3 days just because we didn't know how easy these stores would be to get to. We didn't know realistically how long it would take us to get to each of them, because Google Maps or MapQuest can say it's going to take a half hour, but you don't know if it's really going to take a half hour with traffic, and it's summertime, so there's construction everywhere. How long you have to stop for food or gas or a bathroom. So we spread it out over 3 days, but this yarn crawl could easily be done in 2 days if you're driving yourself and you don't have any other health or mobility concerns. It'll probably take you longer if you have health or mobility concerns, in which case 3 days would be good. But this yarn crawl goes on for 4 days, so you've got plenty of time if you have all 4 days free. I'd also recommend going with someone else. Bring a friend or your mom, or drag your significant other into it, just to take turns driving. And also, especially if there's somebody else with you who is a fellow yarn purchaser, because I don't know if other people have this problem on yarn crawls, but both my mom and I tend to feel a little guilty going into a store on yarn crawl and not coming out with anything. If you have somebody or a couple of somebodies with you, it's easy to make sure that at least one of you is walking out of a store with something, because these yarn stores, they're not making money off of your $5 passport. I mean, a lot of the prizes are donated, which is incredibly great by the companies who donate, but they're putting a lot of work and organization into something that does not guarantee them higher sales. So, as somebody who likes to support small business, especially yarn stores, it is great when you go with somebody or a couple of somebodies, so that you can take turns buying stuff and you're not completely broke at the end. Yep, so we spaced it out over 3 days, and we did it sort of funny because where we're located in relation to 91. We kind of had to go over east, and then we went north, we overnighted in Vermont, came back south, and then the third day we just kind of hit southern Connecticut. Those arm motions were backwards to you, but it helped me figure out where I am in the air in my mental map. So the first day we went to four yarn stores. The first yarn store we went to was Village Wool in Glastonbury, Connecticut, which is a very, very nice shop. That shop was very easy to get to. It's easy to spot from the road. It's right on the road, and there is a parking lot next door. There is on-street parking in the front, but because of the way we came off the highway, it wouldn't have been practical for us to try to get into that on-street parking. But there is a little strip mall next door, and they have a parking lot, and it's very easy to find parking to get into this store. The size of this store, I wrote down, it's surprisingly large. It looks like a small storefront, but it has 2 levels. It has the main level that you see from the storefront, and then a few stairs, and there's another room that's a little bit bigger than that front room, that's also a part of the store. If you have mobility concerns and you can't do stairs, these people were extremely helpful, and they would absolutely help you find whatever it is you needed that's on that second floor if you couldn't go up and down those stairs. I think it was only 3 stairs, but I know there are people who can't do stairs at all, so that is something to keep in mind. But they were really friendly and absolutely willing to work with us to find anything if we were looking for anything specific. They had a really good selection of yarn. They had a lot of the staple yarns. They did have some specialty yarns. They did have some indie dyed yarns. It was a really good selection. And at the time they were having a great 70% off sale on a bunch of stuff. So it was a really good selection of yarns. It's definitely a store that I intend to go back to. Yes. I personally didn't purchase anything there. But my mom got some sock yarn, which she had never seen before, so that was really exciting for her. And then from there, we drove north up I-91 into Northampton, Massachusetts. And there's 2 yarn stores on this crawl in Northampton, Massachusetts. We first stopped at Northampton Wools because we knew it would be smaller than Webb's. Because all the yarn stores are smaller than Webb's. But Northampton Wools is in kind of downtown Northampton. It's right off of Main Street. And it is pretty easy to find. We had a little bit, not a hard time, but it was a little bit harder to find it because there is construction going on that road, which kind of blocks your line of sight. So for this summer, it might not be the easiest to get to, but under normal circumstances, it's right there. It's easy to see. The door is on the corner, so you can see it coming up as you're looking for the intersections. And even though it is in the kind of downtown-ish area of Northampton, it is really easy to find parking. There is a small pay-to-park lot just down the road. It's kind of behind the building, and just past that there is a parking garage. So a short walk, and it's not a high traffic street back there where you park. So easy to find, easy to park a car, which is good because those first 2 days we were taking my mom's SUV. So parking was something we were definitely looking out for. The size of the shop is sort of a middling sized shop. There was a little bit of a downstairs, which kind of expands the space, but downstairs looked like it was more where any classes would be held. The majority of the downstairs room was taken up by, a table and chairs. That is a concern if you have mobility issues. It is a full staircase to get downstairs into the bottom room. So if you can't do stairs, you would need to ask for assistance to retrieve anything from that. But most of the downstairs yarn is kind of along the stairwell wall and directly in front of the stairs at the bottom, so you can see what is available, and they would be willing to help you out with that. Most stores are willing to help you out with stuff that you can't get to. But otherwise, they had a good selection of staple yarns. They had some really interesting locally dyed yarns. There was a cool kind of self-striping yarn that was pointed out to us that had kind of rainbow gradients, but it would be like the warm colors of a rainbow alternating with the cool colors of a rainbow. It was really neat to see. And they also had a trunk show going on with, I believe it was Woolfolk, and they're going to be a supplier of that same company. If I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me, but I believe it was Woolfolk, and they are going to be a supplier of Woolfolk yarns. Which was new for them, and they were very excited about it. And it's lovely yarn, absolutely. Right to be excited about it. But yeah, good selection of yarns. I did end up buying from them. I purchased a skein of Manos del Uruguay Alegría in the agave colorway. And this is their fingering weight base. It's 75% superwash merino, 25% polyamide. In this kind of color. I do have projects in mind for all of the yarn that I bought, which is very exciting. I have a lot of scrap fingering weight in bigger than mini skein amounts, and I am planning on doing a Marled Magic shawl by Stephen West at some point, and I was looking for, you know, if I happen to find anything that I think would go with the yarns I already have, for kind of just adding to the bulk of that shawl. Because I don't think I have enough yardage in the scraps that I'm planning on, so I figured buy a couple of skeins to marl with those scraps. So this is what I chose to go with that. Absolutely lovely skein, lovely shop, very friendly. Would recommend it if you're in Northampton, Massachusetts. And then we got lunch because timing. But if you are in Northampton, Mass, I would recommend Local Burger for lunch. We went there for lunch. It's the only burger I've ever had where the burger was so well put together that none of it fell out of the bun, not even the sauce. I was so impressed. That's never happened to me before. That's never happened with burgers that I've made, and that's never happened with burgers that I've bought in a restaurant before. I was duly impressed. And this wasn't a plain burger. It was one of those, you know, burger, cheese, bacon, lettuce, tomato, barbecue sauce, and ranch type deals. Not a single bit of it fell out of the bun. So impressed. And it's a 2-minute walk from Northampton Wools, so great location if you are doing this yarn crawl, if you're up there on a trip, as opposed to it being your neighborhood store. So then we went over to Webb's, which is maybe half a mile away. It was a little harder to find, just because it's down a weird kind of road, but there's only 2 ways to go, and once you know it's not that way, you turn around and you go the other way. They do have their own parking lot, which is great. They did have a sign up, it's just is a weird little back road. Kind of between 2 other roads, so when you hit the other road, you know you've gone the wrong way. Size of the shop, obviously big. It's a big store. It's a big store. And the selection is incredible. I mean, they've got all the major yarn brands that you could think of. They've got some of the smaller yarn brands. They've got needles, they've got weaving things, they've got spinning things. You kind of can't say enough about Webb's. I actually ended up walking out of Webb's without any yarn, but I figured that might happen. I have a Cricut 10-inch loom that I want to play around with more, but I hate the stick shuttles that they come with. So I invested in a couple of these little boat shuttles. Tiny little boat shuttles. These are actually meant for kind of the ends of your work where, I don't know the terminology, but the space between your warp threads is very narrow. But my loom is tiny, and the regular boat shuttles are about as wide as the loom. So I went with tiny little boat shuttles to play around with weaving things. I figured they would have something like that. And they did. Then from there, we went up to Deerfield, Massachusetts to Sheep and Shawl, which was really easy to find. They have this nice, helpful, giant wooden sheep that says yarn on it. that you can see from the road. You can't really see the store from where you're turning. It's like a curve along the road and there's trees there, but it is really easy to find where you're supposed to be. And they have their own little parking lot. It's a fairly rural community out there. You're on a road. It's on a road that looks like it should be a highway, but it isn't. One of those. So really easy to find, and great place to park. And there's a pizza place next door if you're hungry. It is a small shop, Sheep and Shaw, but they do fit a lot of stuff into that shop. There wasn't a huge selection of yarn, but there are a lot of things in that shop. The yarn section of the shop is primarily, I forgot to write this down, but it's primarily a company that does Wyoming sourced and spun wool. It's incredible wool. It's lovely. And they also have a section for local wool, which cracked me up because I found skeins of Palmer Family Farm yarn in the local section, and typically you would not consider, I think it's Tolland, Connecticut, local to Deerfield, Massachusetts. They're kind of far to be considered local, but we figured it's probably just New England farms. But the other parts of the shop had a section of finished objects, hand knit mittens and hats and scarves and things. They had woven things for sale. They had pins and buttons. They had a small section with beeswax products, candles and things, and they had some loose leaf tea. So there's a lot of variety in this tiny shop of goods, but not a huge variety of yarn itself. But it's a lovely little shop, and they were very friendly, very helpful. They had snacks for the shop hoppers, so that was very nice of them. And I did buy from them. I was really interested in their local wool section, and I bought this skein of natural Cormo, and it's from Back Pond Farms, which is in Conway, Massachusetts. And it's a 2-ply sport weight, about 4 ounces. And my intent for this is to dye it and knit myself another pair of mittens. I showed last podcast that I started a pair of mittens for myself, but I'd like to have a couple of pairs of mittens ready for winter because I have no hand knit mittens at the moment. And I love Cormo, and I'm kind of impatient to work with it right now since I've been spinning it for so long. So I'm going to dye this, probably a lovely autumnal variety of colors, and knit myself a pair of mittens. And they were also, one of their freebies was, you know, these plastic darning needles, which is actually kind of handy to have on the trip, because you never know when you need a darning needle. And that concluded our shop hopping for Thursday. We drove up to Brattleboro, Vermont, where we stayed overnight. And just kind of conked out. If you've never done a yarn crawl or a shop hop, it can take a lot out of you if shopping expends a lot of mental and physical energy for you. Some people are energized by shopping. I am not. And we were practically asleep when we dumped our stuff in the hotel room. And it was like 4:16 in the afternoon. Looking back, we could have done another yarn shop if we had timed it so that we did the other yarn shop and then got into the hotel. That would have been fine. but we didn't want to push it with this first time doing the yarn crawl. So then Friday, we went to Hand Knits in Brattleboro, Vermont. And that shop it was a little hard to navigate to it because of the way the streets are set up in Brattleboro. And just kind of the way Brattleboro is laid out. We were in the woods and then suddenly in this like downtown area, but the intersections didn't always make sense. They were not, you know, perpendicular intersections, so sometimes it was a little bit of a guess, like, I hope I'm on the right road. I'm not sure if I can actually make a left here, but I'm gonna do it, type of thing. But once we got onto the right road, it was easy to find. There is a parking garage kind of next door, but it's kind of a small garage and it looks kind of dark and sketchy in there, not gonna lie. There is on-street parking. We ended up parking down a side road that had on-street parking, and walked like a half a block. So that wasn't a problem. It's a good sized store. It's, I'd say, a middling sized store. They had a fair selection of the staple yarns, but they really showcased three specific brands. One of them is a local dyer to them, Wonderland Yarns, who does amazing, amazing yarn. They had a wall of Wonderland yarns. So great store if you're looking for Wonderland. They also had a section of wall dedicated to the Mrs. Crosby yarn line. A lot of selection of that yarn in different weights. When I've seen it in stores, I usually don't see it in different weights. They usually just have one weight and a few colorways in that weight, but they had a fingering, a DK, and a worsted, I think, in multiple colorways, so that was really cool. And Madeline Tosh, which I'd say is a middling dyer. That was really the showcase at the front of the store, were those yarns. And then they had more of the staples in the back. Which was, you know, a fairly even split between staples and more indie dyed stuff. My phone did a thing, I wasn't watching the time. I did buy at Hand Knits in Brattleboro. I bought this Lang Yarn Jawul yarn. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it doesn't really have a colorway name, it just has a number, but it's self-striping sock yarn for gift knitting. So, yeah. I did like that shop. I liked wandering around that shop. I was so tempted to buy Wonderland yarns, but I didn't have any specific projects for those yarns at the time. Because that's the kind of stuff that you kind of want to do something special with. I didn't really have anything. But I would definitely stop in there again if I'm in the neighborhood. Or if we do the shop hop again, I will definitely be in there buying more things. And then we went up to Putney, Vermont to Green Mountain Spinnery. Really easy to find. It's literally spitting distance from the off-ramp off of I-91. You take the off-ramp and you turn right and you're in their parking lot. It's a very small parking lot, but I don't anticipate, I mean, that's not really a problem, I would assume, on non-yarn crawl days. And it wasn't really a problem for us. It was just, you know, trying to stay out of the way with my mom's SUV. Because it's a dirt parking lot right there at the mill and shop. This shop is the tiniest shop known to man. I didn't expect it to be that small, but it doesn't surprise me that it was that small, because mostly the building is their mill. But I tell you, there was 2 ladies, my mom, me, and the guy behind the counter, and we were all kind of like, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. So 5 people barely fit in that shop together. Selection, there's only one, it's all Green Mountain Spinnery yarn, as you would expect. So if you're not looking for Green Mountain Spinnery, it's kind of a spot to stamp and leave, because that's all there is. What else to say about Green Mountain Spinnery? Yeah, I mean, it's high quality wool. It's a local small business that people talk about a lot on podcasts, especially if they're in this New England, New York area, because they are known for kind of how they process their wool and doing it all local with local Vermont farms and things. And I did end up buying from, I wasn't anticipating buying much from them, but they had some of their bases were 40% off for the shop hop. And I had it in the back of my mind that I did want to get yarn for a fingering weight sweater, because I've been slowly accumulating and or spinning for heavier weight sweaters, and a fingering weight sweater is something that I want to try again. So at 40% off, I could not say no. So this is the yarn that I got. I got 5 of these. Because I looked up, I don't remember what it's called. It's the free sweater pattern by Tin Can Knits. The fingering weight version. I had looked up the approximate size I would want to do and the approximate yardage type of thing, so I went with 5. So this is the wool I went with. My light's kind of going a little funny because I'm not using my lights, but it's their Sock Art Lana 2-ply sock weight, 100% fine wool, 400 yards per skein, just the grease gray yarn. So yeah, I got 5 of these for less than $100. It was with tax like $72.80 or something, which for this type of yarn is a steal. Well worth it. I walked out of there a happy camper. I now have 5 of these lovelies. Oh, look at that. I'm excited about that. Definitely worth a trip up there if that is a yarn that you are interested in getting your hands on. You know, especially if you're local to Connecticut or Massachusetts. It's not that far of a drive. It's pretty close to the border of Vermont and Massachusetts. So if you're in this southern New England type area, it's really not that far a drive. So I'll probably be taking another trip up there at some point in the future when I want to invest in some more high quality yarn like that. And then we decided to drive back down I-91 into Connecticut to go to Margies Yarn Crafts, which is in Granby, Connecticut, which is close to the Massachusetts border. And from there we can back road it home and not take the highway. So that was all part of the plan. Margie's Yarn Crafts is easy to get to. There's a clear sign. They have a parking lot. Keep losing track of where my thoughts are going. I just spent 3 days yarn crawling. I'm tired. It's a small to middling sized store. It's probably bigger than I think it is, but they have so much crammed in there. You're kind of in a narrow maze of yarns, which is fantastic for a yarn store if you're looking for a lot of stuff. They do make really kind of efficient use of the space to get as much display and inventory out there in front of you, which is really cool. If you have mobility issues, it might be a bit of a squeeze to get around in the store, but they were absolutely helpful, friendly, great folks there at that yarn shop, which we've heard about from other Connecticut folks, that this is sorry, debris in my face. We've heard about how great this yarn store is before. They had a great selection of yarns, a lot of staple yarns, always good. They did have a nice, I noticed, big selection of plant-based fibers. In one full corner it was all linen and cotton, which was which struck me as, you know, out there, easily available. In general, just in other stores I've been to, they usually don't have much. Not just on this crawl, but in other stores, they usually don't have much by way of cotton or linen. But that also could be when I go to these yarn stores, because usually I go to yarn stores in the fall and in the winter, which most people are looking for wool at that point. But that was something I noticed at Margie's Yarn Crafts, that there was a good selection of cotton and linen plant-based yarns readily available to the eye to see. They also are a carrier of Koigu yarns, and they make a point of making that a big focal point of their store. They have a wall of Koigu yarns. So if that's what you're looking for, that is a good store to go to for it. They also had an extra freebie for shop hoppers. They gave us this little tassel kit with a little mini skein in it. How to make a tassel. So that's pretty cool. I won't make a tassel with this. This will probably just go into my corner to corner blanket, but that was really cool that they took the time to do an extra little thing to give away to shop hoppers. That was really generous of them. I didn't end up buying anything in that store, but Mom bought something, so we maintained our something is bought in every location guilt thing. But she found some stuff that she was looking for, so that works out. And then we back rode it home from there, so that was so nice. Because let me tell you, just driving I-91 from Vermont into, not really into Connecticut, but basically to the Connecticut border, is super boring. And also there was construction all down the highway. So super boring and super slow compared to the drive up. So back roading at home was really good because we had, I don't know technically how much time there is to drive between our house and Granby, but we were so sick of just seeing the highway. So back roading at home was really good from there. Yeah, and that concluded Friday of our yarn crawl. if we had been near any other stores at that point, we could have done more stores. But the only other stores we had left to do were in southern Connecticut, which would take us a while to get to. We would only have been able to get to one store before the stores closed for the crawl. So we decided to save all the southern Connecticut stores for Saturday, which was yesterday at the time of filming this. And when I talk about these stores, if you're familiar with Connecticut, or if you look these up on a map, the way we did it is kind of ridiculous. But the initial plan was to meet Gabby at New Haven for the end of the crawl, or to get lunch or something, and that didn't end up happening, but we didn't really finalize those plans until we were already done with the 3 stores that we planned in a weird order. So so listening to this, you'll be like, why did you do it that way? It's because we were planning on ending at New Haven to meet with Gabby, and that didn't end up happening. So for Saturday, the first one we went to was, where are you? Country Yarns in Wallingford, Connecticut. See, these ones I have to look up the towns, because the way we went was so weird that we kind of ended up passing some of these towns more than once. So first we went to Country Yarns in Wallingford, Connecticut. This one was a little harder to get to. Easy route off the highway, but where Country Yarns is located, it's in a sort of strip mall in front of another strip mall, and they kind of block each other, and it has a very small sign. It's one of those things where if you know it's there, it's easy to get to, but we had never driven down this way before. We didn't know where we were going, and we almost flew right past it. They do have a parking lot between the 2 strip malls, so there is a place to park, and that is free parking. But yeah, it was the first shop on the shop hop where we almost flew right by it while we were trying to get there. Yeah. And this shop is kind of small, middling shop. They have a large selection of things, but a small amount of staple yarns. Like, they had a little bit of probably Plymouth Encore. I didn't really look at it that much, but it was a small selection of staple yarns. They had they have their own in-house hand-dyed yarns, which is prominent and on display. But most of the yarns that they sell at this shop are specialty yarns. The sparkly yarns, the yarns with bits and bobs in them, the art yarns, not stuff that either my mom or I gravitate towards. So if that is something that you are looking for, if you are looking for mohair or sparkly mohair or those like ribbon yarns or any of those specialty like not wool yarns, this is a place for you to go. They have a ton of really interesting specialty yarns. So it was a really cool shop to walk around in, but not necessarily one that myself or my mom would shop at normally. I did find a couple of their in-house dyed yarn mini skeins that I liked to add to my varying mini skein projects. So their in-house hand-dyed yarn is Zephyr Designs, hand-painted at Country Yarns. And I got this mini skein, which doesn't have a color name on it, but it's this neon yellowy green. And this mini skein, which is a black speckled on undyed. They have beautiful, beautiful dyed yarns. There was just nothing that really sang for an already planned project for me with the colorways that they had up at the time. But I imagine that that's one of those things where you have to check back every once in a while to see what they have up there, what they're dyeing at the time. But these two will be great in mini skein projects. And I have like 3 of those blankets on the go, so it's not like I won't use them. And then we went over to the Yarn Barn, which is in Woodbridge, Connecticut. That one was fairly easy to get to. It was another shop with a small sign at the road. It's easy to find once you know where it is, but again, they had a small sign at the road that's hard to read from further back down the road. So it's one you got to keep your eye out on. But once you know where it is, you know where it is. They also have a parking lot. We were able to park right in front of the store. And this is a pretty big store. It's not as big as Webb's, but it was the biggest out of all the other stores. They had a huge selection of staple yarns. They had hand-dyed yarns. They had a lot of interesting different yarns. Just a lot of stuff. Like they had a lot of the big companies like Plymouth, and they've all lost my brain except for Plymouth. But they had a large variety of the types of yarns that companies like Plymouth produce. So like they had the, Plymouth Homestead, and they had the, again, I'm blanking on all the things, but variety of different weights, variety of different types of yarns. Everything from lace weight to super, super bulky. They had those really super bulky yarns from Loopy Mango. They had some of those. They have a huge sale corner, which was really fun to poke around in. It was one of those stores where you're kind of paralyzed by choice if you're not looking for anything specific. You just end up walking around like, I could knit all the things with this. But like there's a lot of stuff in that store. Fantastic store. Absolutely worth going to if you're in Connecticut. I didn't end up buying anything from it. I think I was just, again, paralyzed by choice, and there wasn't anything that really screamed at me that it needed to be in a project that I was planning. But definitely a store that I want to go back to at some point when I'm looking for yarn for a project. Then we went on to the Yarn Basket in Branford, Connecticut. What was I just gonna say here? I don't know what I was gonna say. It's an easy store to get to. It was easy to find. It's actually in a plaza with a couple of other craft stores. Like there was a cross-stitch shop and I think a quilt shop in that same plaza. We didn't go into either of those, but it's easy to find it. And it's in a strip mall with a parking lot in front of it, so there's places to park. It was a lovely little shop. It wasn't it wasn't a teeny shop, but it wasn't I'd say it was a middling shop. Very clean lines in that shop. All the shelving was white, very orderly, stacked neatly. It's like if IKEA had designed the interior of this shop type of thing, like clean lines, white shelving, everything in its place, bright, open, airy, a very nice shop. Not really any hand-dyed yarns or any of the kind of middling indie dyer yarns. It was mostly staple yarns, your Plymouths and etc. But definitely a fun shop to go in. They had lots of samples knit up in the different yarns, and again, very clean, very easy to find everything. Very cheerful people running the shop. It was a great place to stop, great place to look at things. I didn't end up buying anything from there, but we got a free sock pattern from that shop done in the Plymouth Happy Feet Splash yarns, and they were having a sale on that, so my mom picked up one of those splash yarns. But I've already knit a pair of socks in the splash yarns. But again, lovely little shop. Definitely want to go back there at some point when I'm looking for yarn for a project, especially a bigger project. It's one of those spots where you could easily find what you're looking for to do a sweater or a blanket. And then we turned around and went back the other way to Knit New Haven. Knit New Haven is the only shop on this shop hop that I personally have been to before. Easy to get to. Depends on how well you know New Haven. Unfortunately, the highway system around New Haven is the word that's coming to mind is not polite for mixed company, okay? Calling it a hornet's nest of anger would be kind. Especially since they've been doing construction on the I-91, I-95 on-ramps, off-ramps, interchange, bridge area for well over a decade now, and the ramps don't always go the way they used to. It's a mess. So if you're unfamiliar with the area, you might find yourself hopping on and off the highway trying to get to the right part of town. Unfortunately, it's very hard to avoid that nonsense. I don't know how easy it is to get to coming... Which way were we going? We were going north on 95. It was fairly easy to get to coming north on 95. I don't know how easy it is to get to coming south on 95, or from any other direction, because New Haven's a mess. And that whole area getting on and off the highway is awful. Once you're in New Haven, it's not that hard to get to. Once you're away from the highways, it's not hard. It is down a one-way street. That is something to be aware of. And because it's New Haven, parking is a bit of an adventure. We had initially planned to park in the George Street garage because it's a few blocks away and easier to park in the garage than on street most of the time. But we learned that the George Street garage is closed on the weekends, unfortunately. There is on-street parking on, what street is that? I always confuse. Whitney Avenue. I always forget which one it is, but it's on Whitney Avenue. It's a one-way street. There is on-street parking. It's metered parking. And the meters don't make it very clear how much it costs. I put $1 into the meter just to ensure that my car was not going to get towed. It turned out pretty okay to park that Saturday on the street. There was open parking on the street. I didn't have to parallel park. I just pulled in behind somebody. But since it's a city and it's on street parking, there's never really a guarantee there. If you're going during the week, you can park in that George Street garage a couple blocks away. I did see signs for another parking lot further down, but we lucked out and there was a bunch of empty spots in front of that section of the city. New Haven's kind of a small store. It's one of those small but mighty stores. They have a section for the staple yarns, mostly in worsted weight. They have Mad Tosh, but they like to showcase the kind of specialty yarns that they have, which is not specialty as in sparkly magic yarn, but they do carry Quince & Company, which I think they're definitely the only store in Connecticut that I've heard of that carries Quince & Company. So they have a lot of Quince & Company showcased front and center, and I saw this trip that they have the Brooklyn Tweed Arbor kind of on display. And I haven't seen that in any of the other New England shops that I've been to recently. So they tend to showcase those types of yarns that they can get in as kind of exclusives. I ended up buying from that store because I like to play with the Quince & Company yarns. This is their Piper yarn, which is 50% Superfine Texas Merino, 50% Super Kid Texas Mohair, which is, I don't think it's thin enough to be a lace weight yarn, but it's definitely very thin yarn. It's a singles yarn. And this will also be incorporated into my Marled Magic future shawl that I'm gathering my materials for. But definitely a yarn store to check out. But I know I've talked about that store before when I last bought some Quince & Company yarns. And other people have talked about it on other podcasts. It's easy to get to if you're coming in from New York City, because you just take the train in and it's downtown. So, and that was our last stop of the yarn crawl, or the shop hop. Am I going to do it again? If Gabby's going to come with us next year, absolutely we'll do it again. But if not, it was a great way to see a bunch of different yarn stores in the New England area, but it is kind of a trek. It requires a lot more planning than our local Western Connecticut yarn crawl. And 11 stores is a lot of stores to go to in a few days. You kind of get buying fatigue towards the end of it, and you're like, I know I need to buy something, or one of us needs to buy something, but I think we found everything over the past 2 days, you know, type of thing. So it's not going to be a definite do this every year thing. I don't know that our Western Connecticut yarn crawl will be a definite do it every year thing, but we have a lot of fun with it right now, and since it's all day trip Connecticut stores, it's really easy for us to get to and have fun with. This one takes a lot more planning. Definitely need to work out a car situation. the way we do it and where we're based, we definitely need an overnight solution. So we'll see what happens next year, but I definitely recommend it if you are looking to see a bunch of new stores to you in the Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont areas. It was definitely fun. There's definitely a lot of cool prizes up for grabs. Yeah. That's the shop hop, and that's my yarn haul from the shop hop. So that's probably all I need to say about everything. I've probably said too many things. Rambling forever. That's me. So I'm going to wrap this up. Just a reminder that you can follow the podcast here for regular episodes if you click that little subscribe button here on YouTube. And you can find the show notes with the information on all the stores and the link to the Facebook page for this shop hop in the show notes over at my website, freakishlemon.com or freakishlemonpodcast.com. They go to the same place. Feel free to come join the group on Ravelry. If you would like, I could start a thread on Ravelry about shop hops and yarn crawls, if that's something that you're interested in. It's definitely something that we enjoy doing, and if anybody's got any other ones local to them that they want to share with the group, I am absolutely for that. Just let me know if you want that thread to be open. I will absolutely open one. And you can follow me at all the fun places as Freakish Lemon, like Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Ravelry, if that's something that you want to do. To see what's going on in other aspects of my life. And that's it. I don't know if there will be an episode next week. I will let you know on Instagram, probably. I was gonna say Tumblr, but it's like most of you don't follow me on Tumblr. If you follow me anywhere, you follow me on Instagram, really. So I'll let you know what's going on Instagram, if there's going to be an episode or not. If not, it will be weekend before the 4th of July. Or no. I'm losing track of all the things. It will be the next weekend. I think I'm seeing the calendar wrong in my brain right now. So if not next weekend, then the weekend after. And I'll see you for a normal episode there. Thank you so much for sticking through this episode, if you stuck through the whole thing, especially if you're a new viewer and this is not a normal episode. Usually there's a lot more talking about crafty things and not just yarn stores. So yes, I will see you next episode. Goodbye.